You're muted, Paul.
All right, I think I got the unmute taken care of.
You do.
Good. Well, let's see if we got the slideshare to work now. I think said slideshow begin at the beginning. I should have Terry Walker and the and Times of the Season site in front of you.
Yes.
All right. Before I introduce him, I do want to express my deep appreciation for the introduction to this Thanksgiving week. On Friday, I had the privilege of attending an LDS dinner in Independence put on for the Community of Christ and Restorationists with David McKay representing the Restorationists in the speech, and Eric Scott representing the Community of Christ. Eric Scott and I happen to be second cousins, and so it was nice to reconnect with him. We had a good fellowship, good meal, and it's so gratifying to have activities that reach across the spectrum of Mormonism. And as a result, I was able to extend the invitation to a few more people to join the forum. And I appreciate that we're seeing the benefit of that now. And then I have been asking for you all along to pray since July. I've been asking you to pray for Abigail Barnes, who spent a month in a coma. And to begin this week with a special Thanksgiving demonstration, something I wanted to share with you before I get started this evening, because Travis Barnes, her father, contacted my daughter Halmana, who is our pastor, and Halmana kept it quiet, spread it around the congregation so everybody knew except me. And Travis and Tessa, that's Abby's mama, and Abby walked into our congregation for church yesterday morning. They drove the 2 hours from Iowa to get here for church, but they did that to surprise me and initiate of gratitude to be able to experience the resurrection of a girl who spent a month on that precipice between hope and disaster, unconscious and having lost her mobility. To have her be able to come and share with us was just an awesome experience, and our congregation has been praying for her all along, and you folks have been too. And so perhaps someday she would be willing to come show her face to this bunch as well. But I so much appreciate the fact that some 74,000 people on Caring Bridge have joined their faith together and their prayers to help make it so this family can experience the resurrection and be thankful for it in this season. And for me, it is especially a thanks-producing situation because I got to go see her when she was just beginning rehab in the Madonna Hospital in Lincoln. And she had been unconscious for 4 weeks that I'd gone to pray for her. But then this time I walked in and she was sitting up. She was eating sushi. I stopped and waved at her and said, "Hi, Abby." And she looked up and waved at me and said, "Hi, Paul." Oh, it was such an awesome thing to see her coming out of that power of death into the light of living again. And to hope that she'll be able to continue her recovery is a reason for continuing to ask for prayers for her. But since we're talking about miracles tonight, then I wanted to share that one first, because for her, the doctor had told us that after 4 weeks, there's not very much of a good chance of coming out with normalcy. But that she is defying that, and she's impaired on her left side. Her eye and ear on her left are damaged, but she is now beyond physical therapy. We're still getting some mental and emotional therapy, but she is planning to go back to school in the next semester. Such a marvelous thing to see the resurrection of a young lady like this. All right, this evening I'm pleased to introduce Terry Walker as our presenter. He has worked on 14 archaeological projects at Nauvoo with both of the Harringtons, that's Red and Virginia, Dale Burge for several projects, and DeBarth and I think some others. But he has, in the process, gained appreciation of a wide assortment of strategies, artifacts, and the people involved. And he's pictured here with Kathleen Black and a couple of volunteers working on the pre-Mormon staircase entry to the Second Times and Seasons on Bain and Water Streets this past summer. I appreciate the fact that he came and spent a week with us and helped us solve the problems about just why was that staircase there, why was it closed, and helped us understand the nature of the overall site. He also, in the process, found 5,000 years of occupation on the site, and he is a regular participant in our forum, and his archaeological perspective will be enhanced this evening by an exploration of miracles seen across the spectrum of the Smith-Rigdon combination. And so we welcome Terry Walker, now being promoted from participant to presenter. And I would invite you to join me in a prayer. Creator of the miracle of life, we are in awe of the marvelous experience we have as mortals. What a delight to see, to hear, to smell, to touch, to feel the tingles of love, to appreciate life so much. And then we attempt to apprehend the miracle of creation, from ideas to algae, gases, corals, to galaxies, trees, and human formation. Surrounded by such miracles, we tend to obfuscate, explaining by our best reasoning, using dimensions to impart, relate. Yet the best we can do in understanding what you have done does not suffice to explain nor appreciate the awesome multiverse that your ideas have won. And so this evening we look at miracles with some skepticism of what really does occur, compared with awe and appreciation that yours is a marvelous creation, idea, and formation. And with that, I think we all concur. So we bow to ask your blessing on Brother Walker, our presenter, and all those whose testimonies are being gathered for both the advocate and the dissenter, that our senses apprehend a little more of the scope of life, mortal and eternal, to apply in our appreciation of your creation, perceived only in part by us as internal and external. So then, in gratitude, we thank you for providing us so much within our grasp and beyond, representing your miraculous touch. And that given human sense by Christ Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. Terry, the floor is yours. If you'd like to put the screen share back, I'm off now, I think.
If I can find it, share screen. Okie doke. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
we can
hear
hear
and
you
see.
you can see it.
Okie doke.
Yep.
Alrighty. I appreciate what you had to say, Paul, because I was expecting you to tell that story about that woman, because you've mentioned it several times before. So I appreciate the update on that. It's truly a miracle. My presentation tonight will be about several instances in the Book of Mormon of miracles. And then at the end, because this presentation is not that long, I will give anybody who wants time to talk about a miracle in their life. And that makes it more interesting anyway. So just by the way of introduction, I'm not a Book of Mormon scholar. Paul asked me to talk about this, and I said, okay, I'll spend some time looking it up. So we went from there. Just a sec here. Okay, so anyway, my background includes interest in history and archaeology. I have both a bachelor's and master's degrees in archaeology and histories in minor from Brigham Young University. My interest in church history started when I took a church history class as a sophomore. That summer, 1968, I was to help on the archaeological excavations in Nauvoo. I was hooked on New after that. After a church mission to France and Switzerland, I returned to Nauvoo in 1971. In all my years there, I have participated in 15 archaeological excavations in Nauvoo. The last 2 were with Paul on Community of Christ sites. My first ancestors to join the restoration were in 1832 in Missouri, and then in 1855 in England. They all went to Utah, where I was born, although I grew up in Nevada and currently live in Nevada. So let's get to miracles. What is a miracle? Dallin H. Oaks gave this talk on miracles to BYU in the year 2000. Dallin Oaks happens to be the first counselor in the first presidency of the church. He's the second-ranking apostle right now. This is what he said. A miracle is a beneficial event brought about through divine power mortals do not understand and of themselves cannot duplicate. So we'll talk about how that happens and why. The Book of Mormon story begins with Jesus Christ as the God of this earth. He influenced many people in biblical lands before he came to earth as a mortal, and as well afterwards in other lands. These stories are told in the Book of Mormon. By coming to earth, we know of his teachings, the establishment of his church, his pain for our sins, and his resurrection. His life and mission enables us to find and use the pathway to return to our Father in heaven. Jesus performed many miracles in his time on earth, as did his apostles after he departed. He did the same when he visited the people of the Book of Mormon. That original church did not last long, and many changes took place for centuries thereafter. For many centuries after the life of Christ and his apostles, the Catholic Church controlled Europe both religiously and politically. Eventually, men like Tyndale, Luther, Calvin, Henry VIII, and others challenged the beliefs and practices of the Catholic Church. This eventually led to new churches and new doctrines that broke the hold on the religious and state power of the Catholic Church across Europe. Those beliefs and churches came to America as well. Unfortunately, just breaking away from the Catholic Church did not make religious tolerance fully acceptable either, but it helped. Some of those churches were as intolerant and restrictive as the Catholic Church had been. Eventually, the American colonies created their own country with more religious tolerance and legal attitudes and laws. All of this can be titled miracles because of the magnitude and impact of what was to come, which we call the Restoration. The United States was the only country in the world in which this new religion could have been established. Prior to our Constitution, the religions which controlled the states were not always tolerant and permissive of new religions on their lands. Okay, we begin with miracle number 1 under Joseph Smith Jr. We all know the background of Joseph's interest in religions and churches at the time and his confusion about which church he should join. In 1820, for a 14-year-old boy to seclude himself and ask God what church he should join is an amazing undertaking. That in itself is just thinking about doing that is probably the first miracle of the Restoration. How many of you know a 14-year-old boy that would even think about doing that today? God the Father and Jesus Christ then appeared to Joseph and spoke directly to him. They told him not to join any of the churches. He obeyed and joined no church, unlike several family members which had done so. Unfortunately, he suffered a lot of persecution from talking about his vision. Miracle number 2. 3 years later, the angel Moroni appeared to him and told him about a book made from golden plates, which are really made of tembaga, which is a combination of gold and copper. And it's much lighter than straight gold. That's why it was used. Most of the artifacts the Spaniards found in the New World were made of tembaga, not straight gold. Anyway, those plates were buried nearby. That was about the former inhabitants of the Americas. Moroni cautioned him about getting the golden plates and how dangerous it would be for him. In 1823, Moroni told him to return each year for the next 4 years, and he would be given the plates to start the transcription. Joseph did as he was told. Miracle number 3. On September 27th, 1827, Joseph is given the plates and begins transcribing them. I use transcribing because he did not translate nor interpret them. He listened to the revelations he was given or saw, then told his scribe what to write. His newly married wife, Emma Hale, was his first scribe. Another part of this miracle was the recently arrived school teacher, Oliver Cowdery, who became the most important scribe. Miracle number 4. In March 1830, the Book of Mormon was published. The next month, the Church of Christ was officially established. In 1838, the name of the church became the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Those 4 major miracles that allowed the publishing of the Book of Mormon. There are many miracles within each of those outlined miracles. Joseph's life was threatened many times, and you can attribute miracles to his life being preserved. Publishing the Book of Mormon took miraculous events as well. Next, let us get into the miracles of the Book of Mormon itself. Before that, we're going to look at why there are miracles and what they do for us. And some of the, hopefully all of the examples that I present will fit into these categories. So reasons for miracles: first of all, manifest God's power. Second, teach a spiritual principle. 3, confirm a previous revelation. 4, confirm and strengthen faith. 5, keeps us on the right path and perpetuates our progression. 6, helps our fellow men and women. And 7, find those seeking the truth. The blessings that we receive from miracles: 1, healing ourselves and others. 2, understanding each other. 3, blessing the church and its people. 4, increasing our faith and knowledge. 5, protecting us from harm. 6, helping each other. 7, acknowledging God and the blessings he gives us. And 8, realizing his faith in us. Before we get to specific miracles, as I defined in the beginning what a miracle was, but now let's see how that works. Believing that a miracle is not just luck or chance. There is one major requirement. Faith that it is true and comes from God is that requirement. 2 Nephi chapter 27, verse 23 says, "For behold, I am God, and I am a God of miracles, and I will show unto the world that I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. I work not among the children of men, save be according to their faith." Now, I need to make one explanation. All the scripture references I make out of the Book of Mormon are on the LDS version. And I know that the Community of Christ is slightly different, but at least you can get the idea of what it's talking about. Okay, first specific miracle. Nephi obtains records from Laban. This comes from 1 Nephi chapter 4, verses 16, 17, and 24. "And I knew that the law was engraven upon the plates of brass. And again, I knew that the Lord had delivered Laban into my hands for this cause, that I might obtain the records according to his commandments." Those records were important because they contain Lehi's genealogy and other records, and the records that the Book of Mormon peoples kept later were probably modeled after those records. During the trip, they need to get from the old world to the new world. So this comes from 1 Nephi chapter 17, verses 8 through 10 and 17. Nephi builds a ship. "And it came to pass that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Thou shalt construct a ship after the manner which I will show thee, that I may carry thy people across these waters. And I said, Lord, whither shall I go that I may find ore to molten, that I may make tools to construct the ship after the manner which thou hast shown unto me? And it became to pass that the Lord told me whither I should go find ore, that I should make tools. And when my brethren saw that I was about to build a ship, they began to murmur against me, saying, Our brother is a fool, for he thinketh that he can build a ship. Yea, he also thinketh that he can cross these great waters. Now I, Nephi, did not work the timbers after the manner which was learned by men, neither did I build the ship after the manner of men, but I built it after the manner which the Lord had shown me. Wherefore it was not after the manner of men. Nephi could have learned about shipbuilding from the sailors around the coast where they traveled, but he used faith and obedience to build the ships. Next, we get into Alma chapter 14, verses 25 through 27. And this is where Alma and Amulek are imprisoned. And it came to pass that they went forth and smote them, saying the same words, even unto the last. And when the last had spoken unto them, the power of God was upon Alma and Amulek, and they rose and stood upon their feet. And Alma cried, saying, How long shall we suffer these great afflictions, O Lord? O Lord, give us strength according to our faith, which is in Christ, even unto deliverance. Sort of sounds like Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail, too, doesn't it? And they broke the cords with which they were bound, and the earth shook mightily, and the walls of the prison were rent in twain, so that they fell to earth. Alma and Amulek then walked free. Also from Alma, chapter 23, verses 4 and 5. Ammon and Aaron convert many Lamanites. And now it came to pass that when the king had sent forth this proclamation, that Aaron and his brothers went forth from city to city, establishing churches and consecrating priests and teachers through the land of the Lamanites. And thousands were brought to the knowledge of the Lord. This was miraculous because the Lamanites were their enemies. Not just a few were converted, but thousands. Now we get to war. Alma chapter 57, verses 25 through 26. And it came to pass that there were 200 out of my 2,060 who had fainted because of the loss of blood. Not one soul did perish. And we do justly ascribe to the power of God because of their exceeding faith in that which we had been taught to believe. This is a story of the 2,000 stripling warriors who had faith and had been taught by their righteous mothers. Others Nephites perished in the wars, but none of this group. And it's not just 2,000 because there were an extra 60 that had joined that group, but they're always called the 2,000. They're really more. Getting close to the time of Christ now. From Helaman chapter 16, verses 2 through 4 and 7, about Samuel the Lamanite. But as many as there were who did not believe in the words of Samuel were angry with him, and they cast stones at him upon the wall, and many shot arrows at him as they stood upon the wall. But the Spirit of the Lord was with him, inasmuch that they could not hit him. Now when they saw that they could not hit him, they went away into Nephi to get baptized. For behold, Nephi was baptizing, crying repentance unto the people, showing signs and wonders, working miracles among the people. Obviously, the Lord helped the angry people to be bad shots and protected Samuel. This story continues years later when Jesus is born and resurrected, and the events he foretold come about. In 3 Nephi chapter 17, verses 7 through 9, we learn about Jesus healing. For I see that your faith is sufficient that I should heal you. And it came to pass that when he had thus spoken, all the multitude with one accord did go forth with their sick and their afflicted and their lame and with their blind and with their dumb and with all of them that were afflicted in any manner. For he had healed them, everyone, as they were brought forth unto him. Again, the faith of the people allowed miracles to happen. The biggest miracle in the Book of Mormon comes from 4th Nephi, verses 15 through 17. And it came to pass that there were no contention in the land because of the love of God which did dwell in the hearts of the people. And there were no envyings, no strifes, no tumults, no whoredoms, nor lyings, no murders, no manner of lasciviousness. And surely there could not be a happier people among all the people who had been created by the hand of God. There were no robbers, no murderers, neither were there any Lamanites, nor any manner of ites, but they were one, the children of Christ, and heirs to the kingdom of God. This may be the most remarkable miracle in the story of the Book of Mormon. Peace for 200 years is unheard of and not duplicated since anywhere. One of the most notable miracles takes place in Ether, chapter 3, verses 4, 6, and 9. And this is about the brother of Jared. Now, to refresh your memory, the brother of Jared had been, the people were told by God they needed to leave their land and go across the water to a new home, and he would guide them. And brother of Jared was in charge of that. And the scripture says, "And I know, O Lord, that thou hast all power and can do whatsoever thou wilt for the benefit of man. Therefore touch these stones, O Lord, with thy finger, and prepare them that they may shine in darkness." He had already built the barges that they're going to take, but they're like two saucers, one on top of another. And so they were dark inside, so they needed light. So he had already gone and made these clear crystal-like stones, and they needed light. Then it says, "And it came to pass that when the brother of Jared had said these words, behold, the Lord stretched forth his hand and touched the stones one by one with his finger. And the veil was taken off the eyes of the brother of Jared, and he saw the finger of the Lord. And it was as the finger of a man, like unto flesh and blood." The Lord's response then, "Never has a man come before me with such exceeding faith as thou hast. For were it not so, ye could not have seen my finger." There are two miracles in here: Christ touching the stones and permanently lighting them, and the faith of the brother of Jared allow him to see Christ. He was a remarkable man. And Christ then showed himself fully to Jared. Before that, Jared had talked to him in a cloud. And after this episode, then he saw the full Christ. The last of the miracles comes in Moroni, verses 8 through 18. It's called the gifts of the Spirit, or the gifts of God. And these are some of them: teach the word of wisdom, teach the word of knowledge, have great faith, have the gift of healing, work miracles, may prophesy, see angels and ministering spirits, speak in tongues, and interpret and understand tongues and languages. My church's missionaries and others talk about these a lot, and I imagine yours from the Community of Christ and elsewhere probably do as well. Okay, when I read this, I thought of Paul. The language that Ether uses in this is similar to what Paul did. So let me read what Ether had to say, chapter 12, verse 4. "Wherefore, whoso believeth in God might with a surety hope for a better world, yea, even a place at the right hand of God, which hope cometh in faith, maketh an anchor to the souls of men, which make them sure and steadfast, always abounding in good works, being led to glorify God." And finally, Moroni in Mormon chapter 9, verses 7, 8, 11, and 15 says, "And again I speak unto you who deny the revelations of God, and say that they are done away, that there are no revelations, no prophecies, nor gifts, nor healing, nor speaking with tongues, and interpretation of tongues. Behold, I say unto you, he that denieth these things knoweth not the gospel of Christ. Yea, he has not read the scriptures. If so, he does not understand them. But behold, I show unto you a God of miracles. And now, O ye that have imagined a God who can do no miracles, I would ask of you, have all these things passed, of which I have spoken? Has the end come yet? Behold, I say unto you, nay, God has not ceased to be a God of miracles." So I chose those examples just because they show a variety of miracles. And there's, as you read the Book of Mormon, every few pages, there's another miracle show up. So it's really a book of miracles. So it's something to keep in mind when you read it. Now, I'm going to share a miracle in my life. Then after that, I will turn the time over to you to do the miracles. And Deb, I will let you be the coordinator of that. So in 2016 and 17, my wife and I were missionaries in Nauvoo, and my assignment was to work with FM, which stands for Facilities Management. And there I got to know Rick too, I think you call him. I got to know Rick pretty well. Anyway, and my job there was an equipment operator. I drove the big trucks, the loader backhoes, and sometimes tractors. One day, the electrician comes and says, "I need your help on this building site." What had happened is somebody had donated a house on River Road on the north of Nauvoo, and so the church was going to remodel it so that there was upstairs and a downstairs apartments for missionaries or whoever to live in. And so, in order to do that, they contracted a company in Iowa to lift the house up. And so they lifted this whole house up about 6 or 8 feet and put it on cribs built of like 4 feet by 6 feet in diameter squares. And so anyway, the electrician thought if they lifted that up, he won't have any electricity for the workers to use. So when he needed electricity, he would build a board out there with all the stuff he needs, and then the line goes into the house. So he wanted, and what he does is he has a bunch of old telephone poles, and he puts those in the ground, and then he puts a 4x8 piece of plywood on it, and then puts the equipment he needs on there. So he asked me to come and drill the holes in so he could put his board up. So I go up there, and this house is between the road and the river. From the road, it's down about a 60-degree slope to the river. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, I better not block the road and drill this hole. So I'll go down the hill and then back up and then drill the holes. So I'm in a tractor with an auger on it. So I start down the hill and the tractor has a mind of its own. It starts to really take off. And so I put the brakes on, didn't phase that tractor in the slightest. I just kept moving. So I put the thing in reverse. It still keeps going. So I said, after about 20, 25 feet of this, I said, I'm not going in that river or in that lake. So I'm going to bail. So I'd heard stories about people getting run over by tractors, and I said, it's not going to happen to me. So I took a careful position and I threw myself off. And as I'm going left off the tractor, I could see the wheel of the tractor below me, and I knew I was safe there. And about a 1/10 of a second later, I land. Well, I landed with both hands on the ground and on my knees. And while I was going through the air, I felt this force go through me. Never felt that before or since. And when I landed, I thought, am I dead? I pinched myself because I'm not hurting. I should have broken hands, wrists, arms, my kneecap, who knows what else. And nothing's hurting. So I said, this isn't bad. Well, my coworkers come running down the hill to see if I'm okay. And you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Where's my tractor? Well, I look about 10 feet away, and my tractor veered left when I bailed, and there was a hedge that went between the church property and the man that lived next door. And the tractor got stuck in that hedge, and it's just sitting there with the motor running in reverse, digging a hole in the grass. And so I asked the neighbor if I could just drive through his yard to get back up on the hill, and say, yeah. So I got in my tractor and went up. So that force that went through my body was definitely heaven sent. There was no question about that. That was a major miracle in my life, because I didn't have any pain or any repercussions whatsoever from that landing that I did. And then to finish the story, when I get back to the top, the electrician is talking with the representative from the electrical company, And an electrician explained what he had in mind, and the electrical guy says, "Oh no, you don't need that. There's enough slack in the line coming to the house that you'll still have power anyway." So that thing didn't need to happen. It doesn't matter. It happened anyway. So that's my miracle. So I turn now the time over to whoever wants to share a miracle with you. Oh, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, we'll turn the time over to uh, whoever wants to share a miracle.
Well, let me clarify, Terry. You mentioned Rick too. That'd be Rick McGregor, I think.
Yes.
And you mentioned, but I didn't get the where he fit in the story.
He was he was your maintenance man during the summer, and he used to come to our preparation prayer meeting at 7 o'clock every morning. And so I got to know him and had a good relationship with him. And he also gave me one of his pens when I left. So I appreciate that connection with Rick.
All right. Well, let me ask one more question as the host claiming that privilege. You and I work together as archaeologists, and as such, we tend to put our focus on the artifacts and the stories they tell because artifacts tell the truth. I look back down the list of all the miracles that you've listed, and there's none of them that I can verify with an artifact. How do you
That's
reconcile
true.
that?
That's one of the issues of the Book of Mormon is there's no physical evidence of any of it, because you can tweak the story any way you want, and it's like statistics. I tell people, I said, you can't believe statistics because you can manipulate statistics to say anything you want. Well, the Book of Mormon is sort of that way in a way. You can take physical parts out of that and plug them into where you want and maybe make them fit. Not everybody will do that or does that, but I had a good friend who tried to tell me a little bit about the geography of the Book of Mormon. I said, okay, listen to me. There's no such thing as a geography of the Book of Mormon. Okay, now listen to me. There's no such thing as geography of the Book of Mormon because we cannot place it anywhere. So I don't deal with any physical remnants or stories from the Book of Mormon.
Okay, thank you. Deb, take over.
Okay. Shane Gabriel, you're first. Go ahead, please.
Yes, right now, when you were a missionary in Nauvoo, you said it was back in 2016. Was Larry Gibbons still the mission president then?
What was I didn't hear the last of it.
Oh, yeah. So when you were a missionary in Nauvoo in 2016, was Larry Gibbons still the mission president?
No, he had left by January of 2016. In January, Garth Hall came, and Garth Hall was mission president during 16 and 17. So he was the mission president all the time that I was there.
Okay, well, I was just wondering because Larry's actually an old friend of my family, and he was actually a counselor to my grandfather when my grandfather was a stake president here in Dallas.
Yes, he was from Dallas. I knew that.
Okay, who's next?
There's got to be some stories out there.
I'll share one. I read the Book of Mormon when I was a lad. Went through it several times. In fact, I virtually destroyed it by underlining parts that I liked, and I probably had half of it underlined. And I'd done it in ink, and so that copy, when the ink spread, and so it ruined that copy of the Book of Mormon. It got wet, and so that one got buried. But in the process, I remember one evening reading a very clear passage that said, "For there is a Satan, he does exist." And so I went back to find that, and that quote that I read so emphatically that came out to me in such bold, profound letters, gave me a very strong impression. Now, I've questioned that ever since because I'm not very fond of Satan, but I, at the same time, have to acknowledge that I see satanic powers around, and so I need to recognize and appreciate that maybe that message for me was an important one because, again, as an archaeologist, I like to trust the artifacts and the stories that they tell rather than the stories that may very well be made up by people and exaggerated a little bit into miracles. On the other hand, when I share with you the miracle of Abigail Dawn Barnes coming out of a coma and reclaiming close to normalcy, I believe in miracles. And I've experienced numerous others. But again, to me, that phrase, Satan exists, I have not found in the Book of Mormon since I was a lad reading that time, and it hit me with such a profound impact.
Well, Paul, I also think that story that I've heard you tell several times about your dad walking from Wyoming down to Lamoni, I think it was, and then starting the family down there. I mean, that's a miracle in itself, isn't it?
Well, I drove that route from Cheyenne to Lamoni just a few years back when Rena was still alive. And that 500 miles basically along Highway 2 today, and these sand hills of southern Nebraska still have 50-mile gaps between filling stations. And to appreciate my dad at 18 years old, having the courage, the fortitude, the will to get an education enough to walk that far. I was so impressed with Carl Mesley, who was on the Graceland campus and reported to me that he saw Jody Barth walk onto campus. He said, "You never saw anybody so dirty with such a big smile." And that he wore rags on his feet for the first 2 weeks because they were so badly battered up. Yes, for my dad and mom, he went back to Wyoming then and taught school for a while, met her and married and started the family. And for them, Lamoni was the promised land. And so they moved their family back to Lamoni, and I still love to go back to the farm and get my feet dirty just simply because that land of promises where my roots were established. And it's such a sacred place to me to appreciate that everybody, as I read the Book of Mormon, everybody is entitled to their promised land. And we need to be working on the promised land of Zion today. Bill waved his hand.
Which Bill? Bill Shepherd?
Bill Gunlock, I saw wave his hand.
Oh, okay, Bill Gunlock, go ahead, unmute, please, and then we'll have Val. Bill, you're muted.
There we go. I was on a mission to Taiwan. And then when I came back, I asked God, will this work end here? And then my daughter and her family all went over to Taiwan. And I have two grandsons. One is about, let's see, what grade is he in? About 10th grade. And the other one is in junior high. And they went over there. They came back about a month ago. And the miracle is that those two grandsons are going to take up the work after me. I have that faith. My younger grandson already has given a an oral report to his classmate about Taiwan. I love that country. I love the people. And I want the kind of ministry that I gave to continue. And those two young boys, they have the spirit in them to continue where I left off. That's an ongoing miracle.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, Val, go ahead, please.
All right. I'll mention a couple different miracles and then give some other people some chances and then come back, talk a little bit more about the Book of Mormon if others. Two things that happened to me on my mission. I was served on the Navajo Indian Reservation. The first one, this is my revelation that Paul's right. There is a Satan. I was serving in the mission home at the time, and we got a call from people out on the reservation, and they were having some elders out there were having serious problems. So we drove out in the middle of the night to a chapel there and started met with some missionaries, and what had happened is one of those missionaries, who ironically had the name Joseph Smith, is actually James Joseph Smith, but he was speaking with really weird voices, and it was like demonic. They were saying things that demons would say. So we participated in an exorcism, casting out those demons. And as I was participating in that exorcism, I had to just really focus my mind to sort of keep the demons out. Like evil is a real thing, and Satan is real and powerful, and he was manifesting himself at that time. And the missionary that had been possessed was a superb missionary. Subsequently became a medical doctor, last I heard, but was a very disciplined, capable person. But somehow this demonic possession took place, and I felt I wasn't myself possessed, but I felt that possession, or rather, felt bad. I'm starting to get feedback for some reason. The other experience I had, this was at the end of my mission. My last week, we had been teaching a wonderful family with like 5 or 6 kids. I can't remember the exact number, young kids, and the parents we'd been teaching them, but every time we would go, the kids were all terribly rambunctious, and the father kept saying that the gospel was too complicated to understand, that he just kept saying everything was complicated. So this was my last chance to share any message with them. I don't remember for sure. I could check my journal, but I think I was fasting for some kind of sense of what I could do to help these folks. And as I was reflecting on this and praying to the Lord, I heard, this is like a voice speaking to me. It's the only time in my life I've heard a heavenly voice, but I heard this voice that said Mosiah 2. So I open up the Book of Mormon and I start reading, and it's of course, it's King Benjamin's sermon, a wonderful presentation of the gospel. So we went to visit that family, and this was the message I felt that the Lord wanted to give to them. And so we went in, and I said, I'm leaving. I've got a final message for you. And I started just going through King Benjamin's sermon, reading the parts of it, and then stopping to say, now, you understand this? Do you understand this? As he was laying out the gospel. But one of the striking thing was these children who had always been so rambunctious. They were young. It's hard for children to remain quiet, and not disrupt things. The Spirit was so overwhelming and powerful in that room that they sat there perfectly silent, listening intently. And as I would talk to the Father, do you understand? And he King Benjamin's preaching was so powerful and the Spirit was so powerfully present that he could not deny that, and said, confess, yes, I do understand. I'm understanding the preaching of the gospel. So that's an example of the Lord having a message to give someone, and he directed me to give that message, and this wasn't coming from me. This was coming from the Lord, using the words of King Benjamin and his powerful Book of Mormon preaching of the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thanks, Val. Appreciate that. Monty, go ahead, please.
Is there time for one more?
Yeah, I had,
Yeah, we've got lots of time.
oh, yeah. If you have something you really want to say, go right ahead, sir.
No, go ahead, Monty. It's your turn.
Yes, I have.
Who else is talking?
You mean me?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Merle Hilson.
Go ahead, Merle, and then
Yeah.
Monty, you go after
There
that.
was a time in my life when I found I just could not really believe in God. It just I just couldn't for some reason or other. I had studied many books, and I had listened to Billy Graham, and I went to the Lutheran church, and I sang in the choir, and I had Christian friends, but it was kind of just a kind of a show. And then I had to leave my dad's farm and go to work in a factory. And I met this young man. His name was Don Morgret, and he had an apartment. And one night he invited me over to his apartment for supper. And then after supper, he said, "Well, stay for the evening. There's a man coming over to talk about his church." And prior to that time, I had made an intense prayer that if God was real, that he would make his presence known to me. And I did that 2 nights in a row, and that was about 6 months before this time when I had a chance to go to this young man's house for supper. And after supper, this fellow, Earl Andrews, his name was, he was a priest in the RLDS church, came over to talk about his church. Now, I'd never heard of the RLDS church before. I was Lutheran, as I always would be, and I was satisfied with that, except I really didn't know God. I knew about God, but I didn't know God. And there's a big difference. And anyway, Earl started talking about the church and finally got into the Book of Mormon plates. And I said to him, "Well, where are these plates now?" And Earl said, "The angel took them back." And I said to him, "Well, it'd be great if you had them, because if you did, you could show them to people and they'd be more apt to believe your story." And Earl said, "No, it wouldn't make a bit of difference, because they just say it was some concoction of man." And you know, when he said that, I knew that he was telling the truth. I just knew it. I knew it. I knew it. And that just changed everything in my life. Because I knew the Book of Mormon was true, then the Bible had to be true. And if the Bible was true, there is a God, there is a Christ, and that same thing is discussed in the Book of Mormon. So obviously, my prayer was answered, and it has changed my whole life. I came into the church, I went back to college. I met my wife at here in Ames, Iowa. She was a teacher in Ames. I met many of the RLDS students who came up from Graceland. And well, here I am, over 90 years old, and I've never changed since that time. And I'm most grateful that I had that experience. So thank you very much for all of your discussion and prayers, etc., because the church means a great deal to me. I have read the Book of Mormon, I don't know how many times, many times. I just finished it not too long ago. And there's many promises in there. And I might add, it goes beyond the Bible. And it grieves me that our church leaders don't put out more emphasis on using it in our church services. But to me, it's disgusting. that we don't, because we're told in the Doctrine and Covenants that the entire church is under, well, I can't think of the word right now. I'm getting too old to forget things, but we're well, it's one of the sections in
Condemnation.
60 something or yeah, we're under condemnation because we just haven't used it the way we should. And I personally don't think we'll ever have Zion until we do use it more, because I think that's the key in there. And the Bible goes and doesn't go quite far enough, but the Book of Mormon adds to what the Bible leaves out. So we need it. And tell that to all of your would-be superiors. Thank you.
Thanks, Merle, for sharing.
I could tell many more instances, but that's enough.
Thank you. Monty, go ahead, please.
Okay. I wanted to hear what he had to say, and so it was more important than what I had on my mind. I am reminded every day of the blessings in my life. I mean, the Lord's been so good to me, and it's really hard for me to put in words. But as for miracles, my miracles are day to day. You know, just waking up is one of them things. But I really appreciate the testimony that I've heard here tonight, and I think I know God blesses you all. My brain doesn't work all that well right now, but I tend to ramble. But I was searching for a church when I came across this. I'd read portions of the Quran. I'd read portions of a variety of different documents about different churches. And a friend of mine invited me to a sunrise service that the Methodist Church was having. And there I ran into an old friend, and she asked me if I wanted to read the Book of Mormon. And I said, well, sure. It's one of the documents I was planning on studying. And the more I read it, the more the Lord testified to my heart, this is it. I mean, this is the place you belong. This, and I was able to accept the scriptural basis of the Book of Mormon just as much as the Bible. And I haven't ever believed otherwise. I have another belief. I know, though I'm not much talking about hell and all that stuff, but an old saying that really stuck with me is, you may not believe in Satan, but he believes in you. So it's just one of those things. But I thank you all tonight for the service. You've been a real blessing to me.
Thank you, Monty. It's good to have you with us. Before, Paul, I call on you, Wednesday has added a message in the chat. She says her faith was restored through the restoration as well. It was through accepting the Book of Mormon that I was able to accept the Bible, and my encounter with Community of Christ was too miraculous. Wednesday, thank you for sharing that with us. Paul, go ahead, and then Joetta.
I'd like to go back to Merle, if I may, please. Merle, if you're still on, you mentioned that you're from Ames, and I had two brothers, David DeBarth and Jerry DeBarth, who both went to Iowa State. Jerry got his PhD there. I'm wondering if you happen to make their acquaintance, or if their time there overlapped with yours.
Oh, sure. I knew them both.
All
Yeah,
right.
I knew them both.
I think David is on tonight,
And
well, good.
Jerry died several years ago, I know. And
Yes.
too bad. But I don't know just what year that was, but it must be, oh gosh, probably 15, 20 years ago now.
About 25 now.
But, 25.
Yeah, I'm pleased that you.
Okay.
Yeah, David may very well be sticking around afterwards, so you have a chance to get a more private chat with him or with me, for that matter, if you'd like. I'd like to share testimony from my wife.
Excuse me, Paul. Let me respond to Merle.
All right.
I was there in 1959, 60, 61, Merle, there together. So that makes it over 60 years that we were together at Ames. And it was a good experience for all of
Well,
us.
I finished my bachelor's in 60 and I got a master's in 62. So then I left for a while and came back and worked in the agronomy department for a few years and then went with industry. But I've been retired now for several years.
Fascinating to make these old connections come anew again. Good opportunity for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, interesting.
I wanted to share a testimony
Interesting.
from my wife's perspective, if I may. She, as a Polynesian, had grown up with the story of Hatota. And Hatota was, according to the Faura family tradition, one who settled probably in the Marquesas Islands, and he was one of the founders of the family. And so when you look at Hagoth and try to translate Hagoth into Tahitian, Hatota is a very likely translation. Anyway, that possible linkage was interesting to me. But the more interesting miracle is the one that came from Marere. About 1820, the people of Ana, the warriors of Ana, were spreading across the Tuamotu archipelago, killing the men, capturing women and children, and turning them into slaves. And the Faura family had settled at least 8 islands. And one of those islands was Makatea, which has some cliffs. And they hid out on the cliffs when the warriors of Ana came. The warriors of Ana occupied the coastline, occupied the coconuts, cut down the coconut trees, knocked down the coconuts, and used them as bait. So when the men of Kaukura went after the coconuts, they got killed. And so the men of Ana were able to capture the women and children and basically turn Kaukura into a subservient island. When the other people that were part of the Faura family got that news of the other islands of Raiatea, Apataki, and so on, the people of Kaukura, Makatea was the one where they had the cliffs. People of Kaukura heard about that, and they prayed to Tutono, their statue deity, to protect them. And the first time, a dark cloud covered the island, and the warriors of Ana passed them by. But the second time, about 20 warriors came, and so the people of Kaukura invited them to come to dinner. And they saw that they were counting the children, counting the women, counting the men, inspecting, looking over the resources. And so when they supplied them the dinner, they put small holes in the coconuts so that when the chief led them to drink from the coconut, they would hold it up high and suck on that small hole to get the coconut milk out. And at that point, the warriors of Kaukura grabbed the mother of pearl shell plates with sharpened edges and cut their throats. But one of the warriors escaped and made it back to Ana. And knowing that the thousands of warriors from Ana would be coming back to conquer Kaukura, Marere, who had been influenced, well, who knows how he'd been influenced. Marere apparently had been influenced by the story of Hatota, gave himself as a sacrifice, went to Ana and offered himself as a sacrifice, asking that the people of his island be spared. His courage was met by the people of Ana, such that instead of killing him, instead of eating him, they adopted him, and he married the chief's daughter. He spoke Tahitian. The people of Ana had a different dialect. But because he spoke Tahitian and married into the chief's family, 20 years later, when Benjamin Gerard, who had left Nauvoo in 1843 to go to the islands to share the gospel, Benjamin Gerard got off the boat on Ana. The captain of the boat said, "You better get back on here before dark, otherwise you'll never get back." Gerard told him, "I have a divine calling to be here. I'm intending to stay. You can go on." Gerard's notes indicate that he was surrounded by banshees. Banshees was the word that he used to describe the people yelling and gesticulating and shaking their spears at him. But they took him to the royal family, and there he was able to communicate in Tahitian with members of the royal family who had learned it some 20 years earlier from Marere, who I'm not sure if he was still alive at this time or not. But Gerard was successful then at being incorporated into the royal family. He married a daughter of the chief, and in a period of 6 months, baptized 600 people. The rather remarkable series of miracles by which Marere would offer himself as a sacrifice, teach the Tahitian language to the royal family. That would be then followed up by Benjamin Gerard, who left in 1943 and was not welcomed by the French in Polynesia. So he ended up going to a place where no other English missionaries wanted to go because of the reputation for cannibalism. But he went there, risked his life, and basically converted the island to being members of the Restoration. Shortly thereafter, the French Catholics came and they ended up killing I think it was 8 elders of the island, hanged them because they were involved in a serious disagreement. And so it ended up converting to Catholicism. But nonetheless, there is a fascinating story of miracles in that sequence and is part of my wife's family tradition. And I am delighted to share that story because to me, it speaks of the hand of God working in the lives of people in and around and to fulfill the gospel calling and the calling of Zion.
Thank you, Paul. Joetta, go ahead, please.
Well, I'm going to share a testimony about how God is interested in every little thing in our life. And I was sitting here thinking, oh, I could share some really great testimonies, but this is one that really I have never forgotten. When we started to build the temple, the new one in Independence, I was approached about doing some artwork. And I said, sure, I would be glad to do that. But I knew that it was going to be at least a 40-mile drive every day. Well, I did some of the work, and then pretty soon I'm working over in the Children's Peace Pavilion on almost a full-time basis because there's an awful lot to do. And it was still hectic, still driving. And then finally, though, came the day for the celebration. And this lead speaker was a lady from Japan, an official of the government even over there. And I was looking forward to that. But I didn't clean up to go because I knew I was going to have to pick up a lot of pieces. So I just put my regular work clothes on and went. I started out the door and the thought came to me, go back and get a needle and thread. And I thought, well, that's a strange thing. Why is that happening to me? I got it again. I went out to the car and I got it again. Go get a needle and thread. Okay, God, I give up. I'll go do it. Went and got it, stuck it in my smock pocket. Like I said, I wasn't dressed up to go to the service up front. We got over there and I got out, parked the car, and I was walking up the steps. And this Japanese lady was right in front of me. And I thought, oh, she's going to be the speaker today. And she had beautiful kimono on. She looked absolutely gorgeous. She stepped on the hem of her dress, literally ripped it. I mean, totally across the bottom. And there I was with the needle and thread. Here she was going to speak, be the main speaker, and that would have been really embarrassing to the Japanese people. So we stood on the steps and I said, now just stay there because I can see it from here. I sewed the whole thing up, took a little while, and then she went on and gave her speech that day. God is interested even in the little things, because believe me, that was a miracle.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Rita. Blair, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, I did.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I want to thank Terry for bringing this up as a kind of a testimony service. I have come to the opinion that God works in all who want to serve him. It makes no difference the religion. It makes no difference the belief in the Bible or the Book of Mormon. God works with people where they are. When he first brought the question up, Terry, you mentioned that Joseph Smith's first experience. How many 14-year-old boys are there that would go to God and pray? It struck me that this is the one that I want to share with you. For I was 15 years old, having already experienced many things of the Spirit, when I was in my room at home, all alone. And I didn't very often kneel down to pray, but I got down to my knees and started praying to God. And my prayer was something like this: God, Joseph Smith came to you and said, I lack wisdom. I said, I would like to have wisdom and know what to do. And then I started saying things that I had never expressed before. At this particular moment, there was a thunderstorm outside. The thunder was rolling, and I knew that there was lightning striking in the area. As I sat there and was trying to utter this prayer, I said, God, if you're really there, show me a sign. I've never before questioned that God might be there in my mind logically. But at that point, that's what I asked. If you're there, I'd like a sign. And it came to me to ask for a blinding flash of lightning to come between my house and the house next door. A driveway was there. And on both sides of that driveway were large trees. In our own yard, it was a maple tree. Large, must have been 5 feet diameter of the trunk. And it was shading that driveway. And then it occurred to me, Lord, lightning can be pretty destructive. Please don't hurt anybody or any property. And suddenly there was the biggest flash of lightning that I ever saw right outside my window. I was off my feet and in bed because of that power, the power that came with that flash of lightning. and an awareness that I knew that God was. There wasn't any doubt in my mind. The next morning, I went out, and the bottom of that driveway was shattered concrete. Somehow the lightning had gone down through those trees and hit the ground rather than down through the trees. The last time I was in Independence with my mother, just before she died in 2011. Mom, I was in the Groves, the nursing home there in Independence, not 5 blocks away from where we were living. Mom said she wanted to drive back Eubank Street and see the old house. As we went by there, I said, "Look, Mom, they fixed the pavement there at the bottom of the driveway. For years, that had been shattered. A testimony to me of God's power." And they had finally, long after Dad sold the house, gone in and fixed that miracle in my life.
Wow.
Thank you, Blair.
Wow.
So Paul, I had one person who asked me to share my testimony. I don't know how many of you saw Rick's interview, because if you did, I don't want to bore you all with telling my testimony again about having had my car accident. But you know, I think I'd rather share another one, because as Blair was mentioning, you know, the Lord, when somebody wants to serve the Lord, and for a lot of years I've wanted to serve the Lord, but I had an experience several years ago where I worked for Super 8 motels in a kind of managerial position, and I was asked to go to a different property down in Jacksonville, Illinois, which is about, I think, about 4 hours from where I live. And I went down there and I worked there for a week. And as I was getting ready to come home, it had been a long week because there was a lot of overturning of the staff and stuff. People were being hostile and being fired and quitting and whatnot, and they were short-staffed. So it was a stressful week, and I wanted to get home, but something told me I needed to drive to Independence to see a friend of mine. And I don't even remember, that was an even longer drive, taking me further away from home. So I hesitated just because I wanted to come home. And then finally, kind of like Joetta said, that prompting is just there. You need to go do this. You need to do this. You need to go see this person. And so I followed through with it. Drove to Independence and saw my friend, who was kind of like my adopted dad. And he was experiencing severe pain because he had a case of the shingles, which I was not aware of at the time, prior to going to see him. And so I met with him and his wife. We visited for a little while, and we had prayer together. At that point in time, I was serving as a priest in the church. And so as a priest, one of our ministries, or one of our callings, is to minister to families. And so I had gone there and was visiting with them, and his wife left the room, and he and I were sitting on his couch. They lived in a high-rise, a senior high-rise there in Independence. And he sat there and he cried. He was in just such excruciating pain from these shingles. And he said to me, that prior to my arrival, the only thought that would stay in his head was that he needed to go to the balcony. They lived on the 6th or 7th floor. He needed to go to the balcony and he needed to throw himself off. And he said that he felt that God had sent me to save his life. And he happened to be the man who the Lord had used at the time of my car accident. The Lord used him as my miracle to save my life. And so it just, miracles, God uses us to be miracles, and God chooses us to be blessed by miracles. And I think, as Joetta said, they're just around us all the time. We just need to be aware of them. So thanks for giving me the time to share. Val, go ahead.
So Terry had mentioned a couple things. I was just going to build on some of the things he mentioned with the Book of Mormon. One is I once had a person who's not a member of the church ask me, why was it that the Lord took so long to restore the gospel? I mean, we have what we call the great apostasy and a turning away, and why did the Lord wait for 1800 years to restore the gospel? And the timing actually was pretty exquisite if you think about it. Actually, the Lord restored the gospel at such an early point that Joseph Smith didn't survive. The religious liberty was established, but it was still pretty shaky in the United States. That's why Joseph was killed. He wouldn't be killed today, most likely, but he was at that time. The miracle I want to focus on in the Book of Mormon is, I think it's a miracle that rivals in some ways the 200 years of righteousness, and that is the 10 generations of righteous people in the Alma family. They started out with two wicked people, Alma the Elder and Alma the Younger, but the stories that they handed down, and this shows you the power of the story in the Book of Mormon. They handed down the story of Alma the Elder and Alma the Younger, and their descendants. As you follow them down, you have Alma, Helaman, you have Nephi, Amos. So they had those 8 generations, and there's very good reason to think that Mormon was also, Mormon and Moroni are also direct descendants of Alma, various indications of that. So we're talking about 10 generations of people at the pinnacle of sort of wealth and power. We can tell they had power. They were in sort of governance positions and head of state, head of the religion, and across 10 generations, they managed to remain righteous, devoted to the Lord because of the narrative that they were handing down, these stories. One story that's told 3 times in the Book of Mormon is the story of Alma the Younger going to hell and being redeemed from hell. But their family tradition, and that's what a lot of what we have in the Book of Mormon is really the Alma family stories that they told themselves that kept them faithful. And that there's just tremendous power in those stories to keep people, in that case, righteous across those 10 generations. We live in an incredibly prosperous time. So this was a prosperous and powerful family. That's actually the most difficult circumstance to live in. I wouldn't want my own children to ever be all that rich, famous, have all that prosperity, because I think it's just difficult. It's difficult to remain devoted to the Lord in those circumstances. And those were the circumstances of the Alma family. And yet, across those generations, because they had these stories in the Book of Mormon that they were passing down, they managed to remain devoted to the Lord in the midst of all the temptations that come with position. So, and that was across multiple centuries, many centuries of righteousness, and it's a testament to the power of the Book of Mormon for those who take it seriously and really immerse themselves in the narrative of it, to keep them devoted to Christ in the midst of all kinds of difficulties and temptations.
Thank you, Val.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Val. I think most of us have difficulty making those 10 generations of connections. And I appreciate you calling that to our attention, because wow, to be able to have a few generations of a family. We just had our fundraiser for Outreach International, the Zoomathon, and it gave me a chance to recognize that my grandmother and my parents and I have all been, Arena and I have been contributors. But at the Zoomathon, my oldest daughter, a couple of my daughters, and my granddaughter, and then her kids all were participants. And to have 6 generations in a line that are contributing to the same effort to help feed kids is a little bit. I'm proud of it, but it's you're right. It's a comparative rarity that we get 10 generations of a family that maintain ethical behavior together. That's a neat observation. Thank you for highlighting it.
You know, when you look at that 2,000 years of peace, the next verse, or 200 years, I mean, the next verse, 201, says the people were rich, and then that's when they started to have problems.
Yep.
And it in the next few verses talks about all the problems they had because they were rich, and so on and so on and so on.
Paul, how many generations have dug at Nauvoo?
5 in our family. Yeah, it's been a privilege for me, and it's been interesting to write about the mansion house, because not only the Smiths have been there for 5 generations, but the Garretts, that is Elmer and Roberta Garrett, they've had, I think, 4 generations, 5 generations of their family have worked at the mansion house to take care of it and guide there. Yeah, it's interesting to see that there are some people of the Orths are also a family that's had 5 generations on that property taking care of it. And so, yeah, it is an interesting thing to see that some of these old families, it's just like back to the Barnes. They're not members of the church, but they've been our neighbors for 80 years, 5 generations. And to have long-term friendships like that is, I wrote a poem about it. We talk about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but when we become older and become aware of the value of friendships, the friendships are really the pot of gold that we find at the end of our lives. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you, Terry, in particular, for picking up on a topic like this that not everybody wanted to try to deal with. But look at the interesting testimonies that have come out of it. I'm so pleased that we've had the sharing, and I thank you so much for it. I don't want to cut things off. If there's anybody else that has a testimony. Oh, Bill has one. Let's get, we need our Strangite representation. You're still muted, Bill. Try again.
I think the great miracle, in my way of thinking, is the miracle of repentance and redemption.
Wow. and an often repeated story, and one so essential. Very good.
Terry, I appreciated all of the scriptural references to the miracles. I hadn't realized, hadn't really thought about them, so I appreciate it. I've got them written down so that I can look them up.
I thank everybody for listening and participating. I knew that the testimonies and the miracles from you guys had been the best part, so thank you.
You supplied very adequate background to encourage us to see. And like Deb just indicates, yes, it's very instructive. So thank you. Good night. The Lord is watching o'er you. Good night. His blessings go before you. Good night. And we'll be praying for you. So good night. May God bless you. And thank you all for participating.